Hello, my name is Jeremy Den Hartog. I'm a storm chaser with MajorLeagueStorms.com out of Mankato, Minnesota. And this is my video forecast for this upcoming storm moving into the Northern Plains. Many of you probably are already aware of the potential with this storm, but I thought it might be beneficial to go through a few of the things that are going on or may happen also with this storm. And yeah, it's going to be a big one, obviously. A lot of hype out there as far as what to expect, but also some unknowns. So we'll kind of look at a few of those things. But first things first, this is the current radar for southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, southeast South Dakota, northeast Nebraska. It's the radar site out of Sioux Falls. So not necessarily picking up the precip in Mankato the best, but I thought I'd use this one because it's kind of showing what's coming our way. As you can see, some severe thunderstorms have moved through, especially northern Iowa. Mostly hail related, quarter-sized hail for the most part, but of course, some bigger, some smaller. So just kind of shows the energy involved in this storm, and a lot of heavy rain obviously coming our way. It's a good thing it's not snow because we'd be getting a ton of snow, but back here in South Dakota, it is snow. As you can see, there's an 8-inch snowfall report, 8-inch snowfall report. So, and they're going to see accumulating snow for, most of tonight into tomorrow for sure out there. So a lot of places are going to be approaching at least a foot. Some places maybe even 2 feet. And, luckily that's the first round of snow that's going to probably miss Mankato itself for the most part. We may see a little bit, but for the most part it should be more of a central Minnesota type event. Redwood Falls maybe, those type of places may see a little bit of accumulation, but really our biggest snowstorm is going to come in after this first wave, I should say. It's not even really a separate snowstorm, it's just separate pieces of energy working their way up from the southwest. So anyhow, expect precip probably to start transitioning to some maybe mix precip, sleet, freezing rain, that kind of thing towards midnight tonight, and probably last for most of the overnight into tomorrow. And timing as far as when it's going to actually transition to all snow, that's still kind of an unknown, but it looks like it's probably going to be sometime in the afternoon tomorrow. If it ends up transitioning sooner, then chances are our snowfall totals will be higher. If it ends up changing over later than that, then they may actually go down. But, Mankato itself is kind of right in that area on at least some of the forecast models where it's a little hard to know. But there has been a little bit of a shift with the storm, looking like it's going to go a little further south than what it did for a little bit earlier today. So that's part of the reason why, with my forecast, I bumped up the snow totals. But the National Weather Service also went with the winter storm warning for all of southern Minnesota, or most of southern Minnesota, including the Mankato area. A good chunk of northern Iowa, northwest Iowa, I think might be in it now. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, still, looking at least 6 inches for a pretty wide area. The National Weather Service itself is thinking the heaviest snow will probably be a little bit north of Mankato. I tend to agree with that, although I think it'll be a little closer than what they're thinking. So, I'm fully expecting somewhere around 10 inches of snow for Mankato, down towards St. James and whatnot. And we'll look at my forecast map here in a little bit. But it's going to be a widespread snowfall. Thankfully, this time of year, snow doesn't last too long, so it'll melt fairly quickly, especially considering we're supposed to get heavy rain this coming weekend. But that's going to cause its own mess with flooding and those kind of concerns. But first things first, we got to get through this snowstorm. So some of the primary impacts are going to be obviously the heavy snow causing travel difficult travel across the area. I wouldn't be surprised to see roads closed, those kind of things. Blowing snow may be a little bit of an issue, especially in open areas, so keep that in mind. But the snow is going to be heavy. It's going to be wet. Not necessarily the most ideal to blow around, though when it's falling, it's going to be really heavy snow, so visibilities will be not great, I guess, probably under a mile for sure, in those heavier bands for sure. So don't be surprised if you have trouble getting around. So plan ahead, plan accordingly, things like that. So another thing to keep in mind with the heavy nature of the snow, power lines, trees, those type of things are going to be knocked down fairly easily, at least branches, maybe full-fledged trees, I guess, I don't know. But don't be surprised if there's power loss at some point in the next 48 hours. So probably not a bad idea to keep a flashlight handy just in case. Maybe a cooler or something like that nearby in case you lose power for an extended period of time, that you can at least save some of your food, or you could just put it outside, I suppose. But anyhow, let's get started with some of the things I want to cover here. So first things first, this is the 12Z NOM forecast model. So basically 12Z just means what time it came out. And this one actually shows the heaviest snow staying a little bit north of Mankato. I tend to disagree with this forecast model. It's actually been performing pretty bad, but I don't think it'll be snowfall totals this low, this close to Mankato. I wouldn't be surprised to see totals near this up here. So this isn't necessarily completely bad, but what this is showing is that it's expecting the rain to transition to snow a little bit slower than what I'm personally thinking, and I think that's what also the National Weather Service is thinking. So anyhow, just to be aware that the NOM is actually showing snowfall, heavier snow staying to our north. So keep that in mind. That's always a possibility, but it hasn't been performing that great lately, so it's a little hard to believe what it's showing. So anyhow, here's the GFS forecast model. This one's a little more southern, showing that the precip is probably going to change a little sooner here in the Mankato area, but also the track itself, you can see, is a little further south. Personally, I think this is a little too far south. It's hard to judge, but I always take into account what the National Weather Service is saying, and they're obviously the experts. I'm not, but it looks like they're kind of going with a blend, and maybe they're using a different forecast model that's kind of giving them the area that they're expecting. But these snowfall totals, 16 inches plus, I'm expecting to be a little bit further north than what this shows, but it's probably not too far off. Snowfall totals down here may be a little on the high side, but anyhow, you can kind of see the difference between the two forecast models, and there's other forecast models too, and I'll kind of show that here in a little bit. But yeah, it makes the part of the reason why forecasting stuff is so challenging. Anyhow, another forecast model here is the RPM, and this is, I believe, the accumulated snowfall. So it's an animation here, so I'll kind of show you. And this is kind of actually a little more on the lines of what the GFS is showing. So as you can see, the heaviest snow out here in South Dakota for the time being. Meanwhile, we're kind of getting rain, but maybe a little band of snow moving north of Mankato. And then you can kind of slowly see things transition over. And then boom, all of a sudden this second wave of energy moves into the area. And this is showing, areas 16 inches plus, not too far from Mankato, a little further north. But definitely 12-inch totals, 10, kind of right along the lines of what my forecast map shows. And again, I'll show that here in a little bit. But so yeah, it definitely, between the GFS and the RPM, it's definitely showing some pretty significant accumulations not too far from Mankato, and even the NOM, even though it's further north. So keep those things in mind. Anyhow, let's take a look at the precipitation type simulated radar for the RPM forecast model. And what this is going to show you is where the rain, over here with the green, the pinkish, that's freezing rain, sleet. The pink is sleet, purplish is the freezing rain here. And then blue, of course, is the snow. And when I animate this, you'll kind of see how things transition here. A little bit of heavy snow, obviously, right in there. Some bigger storms that kind of move through. A little bit of freezing rain, sleet for southern Minnesota here. Then we get some moderate snow after it kind of switches over. And you'll see here all of a sudden we get a boom, some really heavy snow. So that's where we're going to get a lot of our heavier snow accumulation out of this storm. And then kind of a longer lasting light snow event for a lot of the areas the precip wraps around this low. I wouldn't expect huge totals, obviously, out of that, but yeah, we're going to get a couple rounds of heavier precipitation here. First being kind of rain, then switching to a little bit of a mix, and then some moderate snow before we get a little bit of heavy snow. Probably the heaviest snow, I'm guessing, will be late Wednesday afternoon or evening, into the evening probably, and then into Thursday. So it's not exactly sure on the time and when the heaviest snow is going to come through yet, because some of the forecast models are fluctuating on that kind of thing. But definitely the transition is probably going to be Wednesday afternoon. So yeah, that's kind of the simulated radar on the RPM forecast model, one of the many forecast models out there, but it's one of them that I really like and seems to be fairly accurate. So anyhow, let's take a look at the mesoanalysis. Basically, this is something that I use and many storm chasers, forecasters, and whatnot use for forecasting severe weather. But in this case, of course, we are looking at the snowfall. And this is actually not a forecast model. This is what is actually going on at the time here. And it updates hourly, so it's not necessarily exactly the current situation, but it's pretty close, obviously. So what I'm showing you here is called the critical thickness line, and what this is going to kind of show you or give you an idea is where precip transitions from rain here in Mankato and much of southern Minnesota to when you get west to some of these lines here. You're going to start running into a mix. So southwest Minnesota down into Nebraska here is probably a mix. Freezing rain, sleet, snow, just plain old rain. And then once you get west of all of these lines, north and west, this is definitely all snow out here in western South Dakota. Some of this may be, more than likely the further west you go, even if you're not west of this line in particular, but west of all these lines, I'm assuming most of this is all snow out in these areas. So these lines will push east as the storm starts to wrap up and the cold air starts to get pulled down from Canada, and eventually it'll transition to snow. So up here towards Redwood Falls, those type of areas where there's a bunch of lines already kind of all gathered together, that's going to change over sooner than what it is necessarily. I don't know why that keeps popping up. Necessarily down here further south towards Mankato, things like that. Obviously a bigger gap here between some of the lines. So we're going to go through a longer period of a mix, and that's kind of what the RPM model was showing there for a little bit anyhow. So that's what is expected for this first wave anyhow of precip to move through. Otherwise, another thing to look at is the surface map showing basically the different precip types, wind directions, those type of things. And I know looking at this may be a little overwhelming, but here you can kind of see the border of Minnesota between South Dakota and North Dakota, southern border, Iowa, and you can see the wind is mostly out of the north across the area. But the main thing I kind of wanted to show you is the little precip icons here. So obviously this is rain over here. Otherwise you start to run into a little bit of snow right there. That one's freezing rain. Some snow out here, snow. So you can kind of see, just like what I was showing you on that other thing, that it was kind of mixing in that area. A little bit of snow even down here in southwest Minnesota being reported on there. So yeah, just kind of reiterating what I was showing you on that last little map here. And also some kind of stronger winds out of the north out in the Dakotas. Not overly impressive, but it'll blow the snow around as it's falling for sure. So anyhow, last thing I wanted to go over is my current snowfall forecast map. This is update number 2. My guess is I'll probably update it again at least once, maybe more than once, depending on how things play out. But Mankato itself is probably, approximately right in here. So I'm thinking right around 10 inches, give or take an inch or two. So areas to our north, could see 15 inches or more. That may, not necessarily every location in this little band is going to see 15 inches, but they have the greater chance of seeing that. So if you live in these areas, obviously keep that in mind. The further south you go, the more likely that you're going to start running into transition times that take a little longer. So that's going to cut down on some of the snowfall amounts, especially down here in Iowa. North into northern Minnesota, they're going to probably stay north of the heaviest snow. There may be, a few inches up here, but Twin Cities looks to take a pretty hard hit with this snowstorm, and parts of southwest, western Minnesota, the Dakota, or South Dakota for sure is going to get nailed by it. So yeah, be prepared. You got a little bit of time if you're in Mankato itself, but not much. So I would strongly suggest starting to get things together. And, realistically, you're probably not going to want to travel too much if we do start getting some freezing rain, sleet, which is going to slicken up some of the road surfaces, things like that, possibly. So ideally, everybody is ready by now, but, who knows? Sometimes people put things off. So anyhow, pay attention to the latest watches and warnings. Always go to weather.gov, weather.gov. And they'll give you the latest watches, warnings on that website, and also technically the official forecast. So, stay weather aware, stay safe. Don't mess around with the storm. It's a big one. So, thank you for watching.